Here we are, guys. We're live on the Strange Oddities podcast. Welcome to the show. This is for all strange things happening in the world on Strange Oddities podcast. We're exploring the horizons of your mind and entertainment and beyond. That's the tagline of the show. So we cover everything here. We cover supernatural entertainment. I've had everything and anything on the show. You never know who's going to be on the show as far as guests. I have unique guests every week, and I have awesome guests tonight. I can't wait to introduce them to everybody tonight. But guys, as always, I may sound like a broken record in the beginning of every show because I just want to get the boring stuff out of the way. So this way we have the entire rest of the hour to hang out with these folk and, talk shop. We're going to talk a very deep, very scary topic. But we're going to try to lighten it up because we've been having fun before even the show started. We're laughing, having a good time, before we went live. So, guys, as always, I can't hear myself live, so you'd hear terrible feedback and reverb if I did that. I don't want to do that to you guys. If there's technical issues, you can't hear me, please let me know. Throw a message in there. We have a chat. If you have questions, guys, I will try my best to relay your questions to the guest tonight. I see there's quite a few listeners already, and I want to thank you guys for tuning in tonight. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe to the YouTube channel. Just click that little bell. And as always, guys, for upcoming guest information, you want to follow us on Facebook. That's where I put all the upcoming guest news and announcements for Strange Oddities podcast. So, guys, without further delay, that's enough of me talking. I want to introduce these awesome people. I'm an avid follower of theirs. I love their work. They're so humble about what they do. And I love watching how they go about themselves because they're so humble every step of the way. And I just love watching them, especially I was telling them, I enjoy watching their live masses that they do on Facebook. I think it's wonderful. These guys are the real deal. They're the front line of the paranormal. Like they go out and they're the first ones to like really take on, the scary and dark cases that are out there. And I consider them like the frontline workers of the paranormal. They put themselves in danger before we do. So I want to go ahead and get these guys in. We have Exorcist Bishop Bryan Ouellette, and we have Jamie Wolfe. They've been seen on several episodes of Ghost Adventures. They do their own investigations. They're from the Order of Exorcists Atlanta chapter. And guys, welcome to the Strange Oddities podcast. I so appreciate you being on the show.
Hey,
Thank you, Matthew.
Us, Matt.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, awesome. It's a scary topic. It's very dark. It's very intense for some people. For some, it's a big belief. For some, it's not. And it's okay if you believe or not believe. It's okay with me. I just want everybody to know we're not here to push that on anybody. But this is a topic that I feel that more people should be aware of because when I was brought into the field, I was taught that this is a very, very rare thing to run into, but you have to be well trained and prepared. God forbid you ever run into a situation like that. And we have these guys. We have Bishop Bryan Ouellette and Jamie Wolfe that take care of this stuff for us. And I want to first ask you guys, what got you going in demonology? What made you want to become an exorcist and do exorcisms? And was it a calling that you had from God? Because I know for some they think of it as a calling, or for some they think it's a work of God. What's your approach? What got you into it?
Well, Jamie, why don't you go first?
Well, with me, I was always fascinated with the paranormal. I used to watch, what was that? The mystery show with Robert Stack back in the 90s. I used to watch that religiously. Read all the books.
You mean Unsolved Mysteries? That one?
Yeah. Yes. That show fascinated me. I used to read all kinds of books on the paranormal and hauntings and everything, but there really wasn't much to do in the late 80s and 90s, and I was in high school, and so I watched the shows when they started coming out in the early 2000s, and I was a Ghost Adventures fan and watched Ghost Hunters and all them, and kind of was just curious about it all and fascinated by it all. Never really had too many paranormal experiences. I've had some funny things happen, but wasn't sure what they were. I know what they were now. But in 2012, I had a horrible motorcycle accident. I was hit by a drunk driver and was nearly cut in half and actually flatlined a few times. And when I was in a coma, I had a very strange near-death experience, and was basically feeling myself being ripped apart by what I can only describe as demons. And I called out to Christ, and I called out to St. Michael. And at the time, I wasn't really religious. I was raised Protestant, but hadn't really. I kind of walked away from the church, as a lot of young people do. So I was a believer, but I wasn't really practicing any faith. But I knew that St. Michael, especially being the patron saint of law enforcement, and I was a cop, I just instinctively reached out to Christ and then basically said, I'm a soldier of St. Michael. You can't have me. Well, as soon as I said that, it was like someone reached down and grabbed my shoulder and pulled me up. And then a light opened up, and then I opened up my eyes in the hospital and saw my mother.
Wow.
And several other things happened that we don't have time to go into, but let's just say after I was finally released from the hospital, I had a lot of questions, and it took me a couple of years to get the courage to actually find someone that might know what they're actually talking about, instead of telling me, oh, it was the drugs. It was the drugs. No, it wasn't the damn drugs. And I found the bishop's website on the Atlanta Order of Exorcists, and they were actually looking for an investigator.
Nice.
And they're actually looking for someone with law enforcement experience. So we set up an interview, and we kind of hit it off right away, didn't we, Bishop?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah.
45-minute interview. I was there for several hours, and we were talking like we'd been friends for years. And he was able to answer questions for me that no one had even bothered to touch.
Yeah.
And so that's how it all got started. And never planned on converting to Catholicism. Just planned on being an investigator on the team.
Nice.
But it was such a raw and emotional experience for me, and questions being answered, and that connection to the divine started coming in, and I realized, okay, God wants me to do this, so the rest is history.
Yeah. So I like to consider Jamie Wolfe, Bryan Ouellette's right-hand woman.
She is. She is. That's exactly how it works, you know. I mean, his
wife would be his shield hand, and I would be his sword hand.
There you go.
Yeah.
That works. And it's very true. You know, I got into this not by any choice. It wasn't something that I set out to do or thought, you know, boy, wouldn't it be cool to be an exorcist one day? You know, and if that's really the motivation behind becoming an exorcist, then you really shouldn't be one, because it really is a function of the priesthood. It's one of the healing ministries of the priesthood. Every priest should be prepared for this, although they're not, unfortunately. It's just the reality of the way the church operates in the modern era. But in the ancient world, it wasn't like that. You know, everyone was, to some degree, prepared that they would one day have to deal with these types of problems. And as a minister, you're obligated to do so. And that's really how I ended up getting involved in this work. It was not something that I thought that my priesthood would turn into as a primary focus. And I did not think that the ministry would become famous or world famous because of it. It just sort of happened that way because of television. But really what happened was that, you know, my life has always been strange. I've had weird paranormal, metaphysical kind of events happening all throughout my life, going far back into early childhood. So I was no stranger to it. And it wasn't something that was, you know, unusual to me by the time that, you know, I eventually discovered my vocation to priesthood and then pursued it. And, you know, after a lot of back and forth with trying different traditions, Catholicism, Eastern Orthodoxy, and then finally settling into the independent sacramental movement, which was kind of an essential thing because of the fact that so much of my ministry was already avant-garde and outside of the paradigm of conventional Christianity. Anyway, in order to solve a lot of headaches for myself, it just was the natural direction to go. What I wasn't prepared for was that we would eventually be seen as an avenue for so many people to seek help that were not getting the help that they needed from their conventional establishments. So, you know, they have their own churches, their own pastors. They belong to either Catholic or Protestant churches or whatever. And they would go to get help or try to get help from their pastors and find that in the end what nobody was willing to do anything, or nobody knew how to do anything. This is even more prevalent in the Protestant churches, where they'll come right out and say, we don't deal with that. Yeah. You need to talk to a Catholic priest. They'll say that. And
they're not shy about it.
They're not shy about it. And I guess that's, again, Hollywood has kind of created this image that, we're the ones to come to when there's a demonic problem, because we have the tools to deal with it, which I guess to a certain degree, historically, that's accurate to a certain extent. But honestly, I am of the opinion that every Christian minister, whether you are Protestant, Catholic, Orthodox, or whatever, you need to be prepared to deal with this, because if you can't, then you're doing your flock a disservice, because these are problems that do happen, and they can be mitigated greatly if they are handled early. Yeah. So people started coming to us because they weren't getting help in their home parishes or their home churches. And as a priest, I'm obligated to do what I can. And so when we started active ministry, this is how it developed. People weren't coming to me for marriages, although some were. People weren't coming to me for baptisms, although some were. Most were coming to me to help them resolve their paranormal or what they felt was demonic problems that they had in their life. And so our ministry sort of took off that way, and that became the direction it went. But it started off very different. It started off to be very conventional, very traditional. Most of our outreach was teaching, and not even teaching about philosophy or esoteric subjects. It really started out just teaching about, Christianity and teaching religious education, because we felt that this is something that most churches are doing very poorly. And we wanted to be sort of a means to circumvent that and give people the proper education in their religion. But that's just not the direction. I mean, we still do that. Don't get me wrong. That is still a big part of what we do, but it went into this other direction, which I think is more dramatic, more interesting. And when you go on TV, that's what people expect to see. So that's sort of how it happened for me.
Sure. Do you guys think or feel because of the world the way it is these days, especially with the pandemic, a lot of negative things going on all across the globe, do you find, because I remember articles being out there about how even the Vatican want to train more demonologists and exorcist people to train as exorcists to be more aware of what's going on because they're getting more cases? Or you guys think the church is more open these days about it? Or do you find
Church is definitely not more open? I think it's actually more closed than it's ever been. Yeah. I think, though, the subject is more out there because of shows like Ghost Adventures, paranormal investigation shows like Ghost Adventures, Ghost Hunters, that kind of thing. And then movies. Exorcism has become a subgenre of the horror genre. There's exorcism films. There's like a whole list of them now, and people go to see them because that's what they're expecting to see, or that's what they want to see. So I think that kind of makes it a little bit, it makes it edgy on one level, but I think it makes it a little bit more familiar on another. And so when people are having issues, and movies do, even though they do usually a very poor job of this, movies do try. Directors and producers try to make them as authentic as they conceivably can. Yeah. And they even bring in people like myself to help that to become a reality. But it's always going to be more dramatic. But when people are watching these shows, these movies or whatever, they might see something of their own lives in it and say, maybe I have a demonic problem or an oppression or something. And maybe I should go see a priest about this. Yeah. And 9 out of 10 times, they're not religious people. They're not church-going people. Yeah. And this is a vulnerability. This is a liability in their lives. Not because I'm trying to advocate and say, hey, you need to run to your church tonight. But when you don't have the tools that the church has set up to protect you from these types of things, you're left open to whatever might come your way. And if you happen to be at the wrong place at the wrong time, it could find you, attached to you, and unless you know someone like me who can help get it off you, you're going to have a real hard time going forward. So that's sort of what happens.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, a lot of time these people, it's things that are happening out of their own trauma. So they'll say they've got a demonic attachment, but actually it's just unresolved trauma that they've been through. And sometimes we can help them out and point them in the right direction as far as therapy as well. But most of the demons you deal with, you create.
Yeah.
That's a very important point that Jamie just made there, because a lot of people think that it's always a fallen angel, some kind of satanic demon from the pits of hell coming into their life to wreak havoc. That is, as you said at the beginning of the show, extremely rare. It is rare. It almost never happens. But what does happen very, very frequently is what we call thought forms, or Buddhists refer to them as tulpas. In the, egregores is another term for sort of like a larger manifestation that other people might experience. But these are all things that we create out of our, as Jamie said, traumas, or sometimes just out of our own negativity. And if we're very negative people, if we focus on depression and anxiety, if we are living in a world of mental illness, that can sometimes project outward. It has two places it can go. It can become repressed inside, and that's the way the mind will deal with it, or it can get projected out so that it doesn't necessarily affect the inside immediately, but then it's a way of sort of pushing it out into the ether, if you will, so that what ends up happening is it can sometimes manifest as an actual sentient separate being, when in fact all it is a projection of that person's psyche. But it, for all intents and purposes, and anyone with a little occult training will tell you, is a real entity that has to be dealt with in a real way. And that's where exorcism can come in and help.
Sure, absolutely. I'm glad you brought that statement up, because for years, like even for myself as a paranormal investigator, I've come across many private home situations where they were manifesting their own situation out of their trauma and suppressed, whatever feelings and raw emotions that they dealt with as a young adolescent or child, or even as an adult. But I would call them more of like, your definition was different, but I used to call them human hauntings. Like, it was a human haunting to me because they were the ones creating the haunting. But you had to treat it, like you said, exactly how you have to treat it.
That's exactly right. And I mean, that's a term you can use for it. Human haunting, or thought form, or tulpa, or egregore, whatever. It all essentially is the same general occult concept. We are very powerful creatures. When scripture says that we were made in God's image, it's not talking about God looking like we do in appearance. What it means is, or better yet, that we look like God. What it means is we have the quality of nature that God has, which means that by God's essential nature, what is he ultimately? Is a creator, right? That's what God ultimately does, is he creates things. He manifests things. He brings things out of nothing and makes it something. He creates purpose and meaning through intention. These are all qualities that human beings have. And look at everything we do. Right? Look at you. You're doing this podcast. You don't have to do this. This is something that you are impelled to create, because by your very nature, made in the image of God, you're a creator. This is the way that you get to experience some of God's power. And we all have that, whether it be through art or music or anything that we try to do. And people that don't live very fulfilled lives are people that are usually cut off from their ability to create. Sometimes their jobs are not very inspirational jobs. They don't have much power to create, and that makes people depressed. So it's a very fundamental part of our nature as human beings. But what it does do as a side effect is that it also means we can create a lot of things that the world in here is more real than the world out here. And everything that's out here really started in here, whether we like it or believe it or not. That's reality. If a building's being built, it's not, doesn't just manifest and the architect says, I think I can make that. No, the architect creates it in his mind, puts it down on paper, then has the tools of engineering and everything else to then go out there with a contracting group to create the building. But it started in the architect's mind first, and that's how everything is. Everything in reality starts out in the mind first and gets projected outwards. But what happens when there's a trauma that we're not able to integrate or deal with emotionally because it's just so severe or so horrible? Suppose we've been abused as children and we can't deal with that, or maybe we were attacked, or maybe we suffered some other kind of thing. That can sometimes become a fracture within the psyche that then now operates as its own separate being, and then can get sometimes, if the mind is powerful enough, projected outwards. Otherwise, it gets repressed in the traditional sense, and that's the only one that psychology recognizes. Psychology has no problem recognizing repressed emotions or traumas and having to uncover them and figure out what's going on through therapy to resolve it, but they don't deal at all with projected outward traumas. And that's also less common, but also a very viable thing. And a lot of these demons that people think they see are actually that.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and your analogy, and I just want to say this, and I mean this wholeheartedly, I love the way Bishop Bryan Ouellette just explains things. You have such a way of expressing these things and how they are, and like one can relate better to like how you express those things that you were defining. And I love that about you. I really do. And I
appreciate that.
And Jamie Wolfe, I don't want to leave her out of that statement either, because Jamie Wolfe is so down to earth and like so relaxed. Like these guys are like so down to earth and easy to talk to, and I think that's why I'm so comfortable with like when I email you guys and we're talking back and forth, and it's like the chemistry is already there because you guys are so fun and you're so humble about what you do.
Thank you, but you just need to be receptive to people. I mean, even in my career, I tried to talk to people a lot before they got themselves in trouble. And as soon as you find something you can relate to with each other, the conversation can take off, and you don't know where it can go. I've said this before. There's a lot of clients that I talk with on the phone, and we can resolve their problems just with a 2 or 3 hour phone call.
Yeah.
You just listen. 2 ears, 1 mouth. Listen. That's a lot of times that's all people want is somebody to listen who doesn't think they're crazy. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. Sometimes all they need. There's been a lot of phone interviews that I've taken where we haven't even done an investigation, and I've talked to people on the phone without even doing the investigation, and they're doing thorough questioning.
Right.
You can really dive deep into maybe what's going on and guide them into the right direction of their needs, rather than going into their home and setting up shop and making it more scary for them. And, God knows what else you're going to stir up in their home that you don't need to be there. And a lot of times I've helped people over the phone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. So what are things that people can be prepared for if they do reach out to you guys and they feel they have a situation? What are the steps they should take or prepare themselves? What are the tools that you give them to be ready if you are going to help somebody and you are going to go there and you're going to go there in person? What are the things they need to know first?
Well, I mean, I think I should maybe preface that by saying that, we've retracted a lot of our outreach in the sense that we've gotten very good at figuring out what's authentic and what can be resolved from other means. And because our time and our resources are so limited, we now only take the most extreme cases. And of course, everybody thinks they have the most extreme case. That's always just the way it is. But, we do know, and we've been at this long enough to be able to discern what's a case that we should spend our time on and what's a case that we shouldn't. If there's any chance that a person could have better results with a medical doctor or a psychologist or psychiatrist, that's where they will be referred to, whether they like it or not, whether they're prepared for it or not.
Yeah, a lot of times that's not what they want to hear.
It's almost never what they want to hear,
right.
But it's the one that is the most appropriate for us to respond when they come to us, and after getting a feeling for what they're dealing with, that's 9 out of 10 times that's going to be the most appropriate response. And most of the time they haven't really explored those avenues. And even if there is a really bad case that I suspect might be tremendously authentic, I still want to see a pattern or a history that they've tried with medical doctors or psychiatrists first. I need to have evals. I need to know that we've ruled out everything before we go into this direction, because it can be a dangerous direction and it can be very harmful if the person's not genuinely being spiritually afflicted, where it is actually more of an emotional or psychological problem. So that's kind of one of the things that I always start out with. But if we do, assuming all things check out, and we are at this point, we're taking about 4 cases a year. We get hundreds a year. We get probably close to 500 or 600 coming in a year, but we only take about 4. That's not by choice. That's a lot of it's because of the limitations of our resources and time. And when you take a case, you have to commit to it. It doesn't just, like you see me on TV come in and like in a few hours, everything's good again. But, that's really kind of a skewed image of what's really happening. There's still follow up. There's still working with the family. There's a slow progression towards healing that doesn't happen usually immediately. Sometimes you get lucky. Maybe 10% of the time, one visit's all it takes. That's rare though. Most of the time we need to be working with them and prepping them. But if you're talking about a case that we've decided to go to, what they need to do is, first of all, make sure that they have, if we've asked for them, to make sure you already had your medical evaluations, your psychological evaluations ready to go, because that's the first thing we're going to ask for.
Sure.
The second thing is, I need to know everything that's going on. You can't hide things from me, because I will find out.
And he does.
So anybody that tries to give me just their side of the, just a limited part of the story because they're trying to conceal things, it's going to come out in the course of the investigation. Don't waste my time that way, because that actually ends up pissing me off, and that doesn't work well for anybody when I get pissed off. So I always want to make sure that people are being honest with me. They're being clear. They're telling me everything that I need to know. If I ask a question, I need to know everything about the answer, not just the part of the answer that you want to give me, because it just streamlines it. It makes it faster, and we can get through it more efficiently. The next thing that I would say that people need to know is understand I'm going to expect that there is commitment and follow-up coming up after that. So I'm not going to say you go convert, become a Catholic, and you need to start going to the Catholic Church tomorrow. That's not what I'm going to say. But I am going to expect that you have had a relationship with a pastor, that you've gone to your pastor, and your pastor has said they're not equipped or prepared to handle your problem and that you need us. I'm even reaching the point where I've even toyed around with the idea, and Jamie knows where I'm going with this. I've toyed around with the idea of even saying that we might be restricting our cases to only pastor referrals, and that's it. I might not be taking cases anymore off the street, so to speak, because I want to know that there's actual background there, that they've tried to do this, and that they actually need me specifically to fix this, because there are a lot of people out there that can fix these problems that I don't need to be involved in. I need to be involved in only the most extreme situations where other people have failed.
I'll listen to a case that a paranormal group has referred, a vetted paranormal group that's got a pretty good reputation, because they'll have some evidence for us to review. Right. But what the bishop says is correct. That's how it is these days.
Jamie and I were talking about that a little bit before Bishop came on. We were talking about how we handle private home investigations ourselves. We only do word of mouth now. We only do like referrals, because the dangers, and like you said, the resources too are now getting harder and harder. But the difficulty of putting yourself in a dangerous situation, you want to make sure that everybody is safe, including yourself. And you want to make sure that those people are safe too, and you don't want to go there and make the situation any worse than what it is.
That's exactly right, because it can happen, and it usually does. Even when we've done everything right, it still makes it worse for a period of time. A lot of people expect that, I make the joke, and people are probably tired of hearing it now, but they really do. People expect me to be like Gandalf. I come in, I say an incantation, it's all well again. And I think television, Ghost Adventures, has kind of made it look that way, because they're not seeing the 6, 7, 8, 9 hours of actual client interaction. They're seeing 42 minutes after commercial breaks of what we were there doing, and only the best stuff is featured in the episode, of course. And that they don't show all of the conversation that leads up to the case. They don't show any of the follow-up. And so there's a lot more into it. I don't come in and say an incantation, it goes away. And most importantly, the healing comes from that person's relationship with God. I am a mere facilitator. I'm a damn good one, I will admit that, but I am still just a facilitator. If the person does not want to develop a relationship with God, no matter how fantastic of a priest or exorcist I am, we're not going to have a successful conclusion. So that's why it's very important for me to know that there's going to be commitment there, because I can't waste time on someone who's not willing to go those extra lengths to get themselves right with God so that we can move in a positive direction and heal them.
Right.
It's kind of like if you're, I just use this analogy because, I'm used to it. I used to work, narcotics quite a bit. It's like a drug addict finally deciding to get help, and they go into rehab. They go through rehab, get the materials and the resources they need. But the real fight starts when you leave rehab. Well, a lot of people end up going right back to their old habits, and the addiction comes back tenfold. Same thing happens with demonic oppression. You've got to take part in your own healing.
You do.
Yeah. What are the major signs people should look for as far as, because the signs are always confusing when you research the signs out there, and people that don't know, like we know the signs, but like the average person that may not know the signs. What are the signs that you can express to people what to look out for if they truly think they have something serious brewing?
Well, one of the things that is going to be paramount, I think, is that there is a slow progression that's getting worse, and medical intervention and psychological intervention is not helping, but prayer has an impact. Whether it be makes it worse or makes it better, that's still significant. But if the medical interventions, if it looks like it's, because it almost always does, it's always going to start out looking like a disease or some kind of mental illness. It will always take that form, because there's only so many ways in which the human body can manifest that something's wrong with it. Right. So if there's something spiritually wrong, which is kind of think about it, it's an incorporeal problem. The physical manifestations are going to come through the lens of the body or the mind, because those are going to be, we're going to be able to watch behavior, which is tangible, and we're going to look at physical symptoms, which is also tangible, but the spirit is not tangible at all. We don't have any kind of instruments that can look at that and see what's wrong with it, except for the person's own testimony. So, what's going to happen if a person truly has some kind of demonic obsession, oppression, or even a possession, there's going to be physical symptoms that will mimic or at least work along the lines of some kind of physical or mental problem. If the normal conventional interventions that doctors and psychologists would deploy to fix these types of issues based upon what their diagnosis might be, which is going to always be based upon the way that those symptoms manifest. Right. If they don't work when they should work, if the doctor thinks, oh, well, this is schizophrenia, and they prescribe Clozaril or some kind of antipsychotic, and yet the person's actually getting worse, not better, and the doctor can't explain that, that's usually a really good sign that there is something spiritual actually going on there. If, of course, the client feels that there's something spiritual going on there, because ultimately you still have to come back to what the client's testimony is. We're not going to, of course, come in and just because the family says my brother's possessed, we're not going to come in unless the brother wants us there. Yeah. The only time we will come on just the family's prompting alone is if it's a minor. Yeah. And then if it's a minor, we're 3 times more careful. Making sure that there's medical intervention, a history of psychological intervention, so that we know that we can rule out these things. And that once we know they've tried everything, nothing's worked, then that's when we can come in and start using the tools of the church. And it's not exorcism. The first, tools are not going to be exorcism, it's going to be prayer. Yeah. It's just going to be conversation and prayer. And then, maybe a sacrament, which will be almost always the sacrament of unction, more commonly today known as the sacrament of the sick. It's the holy anointing. Yeah. And confession, which is even more powerful, and in many cases far more effective than exorcism on its best day. Most people don't want to confess, though. They don't want to go into confession. They don't want the priest to hear all the horrible things that they've done. And I think they think that, it's like our ears are too holy or something. No, believe me, we've heard everything. We've heard the worst that man can dish out at us. Every exorcist, every confessor, every priest in the world has heard everything. There's nothing that we have not heard in the confessional, from the worst things to the most minor. So, this is one of the first steps towards getting rid of these kinds of attachments. And I'll tell you right now, unction and confession have been far more effective than exorcism has in getting rid of these things. So that's the things we start with. We only move to exorcism when we've tried everything, and it's just not improving. Yeah,
exactly. And that's another telltale too. Is you can tell if it's a real demonic situation too. Is like by doing these steps and practices that you have can sometimes draw them out. And then you can see for sure whether or not you have the real thing going on there. I know like body language is also important too, right?
Oh yes. Because these are all little things that we look at. We look at how they respond. Of course, though we have to be extra careful now because we are world known. And sort of like some people, I don't see myself this way, but some people see us as television celebrities. They tend to, we got a request for that I send an autograph out to Europe. They want an autograph picture of me. I comply because it's it's a nice gesture. I'm glad I have a fan out there, but I still don't see myself as a celebrity. I see myself as a priest that is trying to do some ministerial work for people that need it. But the problem with that exposure has been that we have a lot of people that are malingering because they hope that maybe if I get involved, I might say, "Hey, Zach, can you go take this case and let's put them on Ghost Adventures?" That's not going to happen. I don't give Zach cases. So if that's your motivation, don't call me now. But the fact is, that's one of the things. And then there's actually honest malingering, or what I call honest malingering. And that's when a person really doesn't know that they're lying. They really truly believe that what they're experiencing is true, but it's not what their perception is leading them to believe. And we see that a lot, sometimes with dementia patients, sometimes with people that have severe mental illness, and it's just not being properly treated, or let's face it, in this country at least, the mental health profession is not very effective. It's anytime you put profit into medicine, you're going to have problems. And, then you're going to get people that are doing this work because it's a good income. It's a lot of status, but it's not about the healing people anymore. And I think nowhere have I seen that more than in the field of psychology. Yeah. It's a horrible thing. And I hate that. But this complicates our job too. So we have to find that balance all the time. And that can be the tricky part of this.
Yeah, absolutely. I've always told people I work with and my wife, who we investigate together. I tell her all the time, in a way, even though I don't have the certificate or a degree in psychology, but I feel like we act as psychologists in a way, because we have to vet and weed out like the medical issues and the serious situations that families go through, like abuse, and you want to make sure that they're getting the right help. And because as soon as you step foot in a person's house, you become responsible, in my opinion. And you're responsible to guide them in the right path. Not responsible in other ways, but responsible that, make sure you get them the right help. You
become kind of like a peer counselor. That's where it helps to also have a lot of human experience. If you've been through a lot in your own lives, you can connect easier with people who are going something in theirs. Right. And you can vet out pretty easily whether it's, medical, mental, or spiritual, or a little bit of both, or all three.
Right.
Well, there's an element, I think, to this that just by its nature is very much modeled after the same processes and protocols that exist within the field of psychology and psychotherapy. Right. So you're kind of like making house calls, and there's a lot of liability to that. And, there's a lot of liability to this work, just by virtue of the fact that in exorcisms, people can and have died. Fortunately, never under my wing, but it could happen to even the best of us if we're not careful. And even if we've done everything right, it could still happen because, a person can get so worked up that they have a heart attack or a stroke or something.
Right.
And there's a lot of potential liability to that. And even the best hold harmless agreement might not be enough with a clever attorney to destroy an entire church on the basis of this, which is, I think, move the church away even further from doing these kinds of exorcisms or looking into these kinds of problems. And that's what brought a lot of people to us, because we're one of the few churches that do actively look at and research these things. And we try to help if we can. But, we've had to be a little bit more careful, I think, because of the fact that there are people that do not have our best interest at heart. We have as many fans as we have. We have twice as many retractors that are just out there to cause problems. Yeah, that's right.
Yep.
And so, I think if I could give any advice to anybody, have a lawyer on standby just in case. That's all I can say.
Yeah, exactly. I had a really good question, and then it went out of my head. You guys send out evaluations first. You do questionnaires. We do that too. There's probably so much preliminary protocol that you guys follow before anything. Have you guys? I guess the question I'm asking is, what's the preliminary process you guys go through? I'm sure it's you go through a lot before you step inside somebody's house.
We do, and actually, Jamie's the one that typically takes the lead on that part of the dynamic. We have volunteers that kind of help us cut through the extreme influx of cases. But once we start looking or narrowing down the serious ones, then Jamie tends to make first contact, and then she can tell you what her process is, because I give her a lot of professional freedom in that respect to do what she feels is the best thing. And then once she finds a case, she will then refer it back to me, where I will then make a final decision whether or not we actually take the case. But Jamie, why don't you tell them about what your process is?
Well, it starts off with an email with a very detailed correspondence on what is going on, what you've done to try to handle it, who you've spoken to, if you have any witnesses to paranormal activity, if you have any evidence. I ask medical questions. I ask drug questions. I ask if any paranormal investigators have been to the home. Anything and everything you can tell me, past trauma, whatever happened in your past that could relate to this, whether it could have happened at a prior location. And I take copious notes. And so the first interview is basically me reviewing the email. And there are certain indicators I look for. I'm not going to give them away on the podcast, but I can vet through about half of them before I get through the email. Yeah. If it seems like it's something that's viable, I'll set up a 20-minute interview with the person. And usually it goes a little bit longer. And then there's some pre-questions I ask, just trying to get a feel for their honesty. I do have 26 years of interview and interrogations behind me, so a lot of times I can vet out the bullshit from the reality just on the interview. If it seems to be something viable or that there's something truly going on, a lot of times if it's environmental, I'll have them put the phone on speaker and I'll recite the St. Michael's prayer. And one thing I've learned in the few years that I've been working with the bishop is that when I invoke the St. Michael's prayer, if there's something going on, I feel the energy. I get all tingly. And so if they have something going on the other end, I haven't put them on speaker. I recite the prayer. And if I feel something, I don't say anything. Right. And I'll ask them, how do you feel? And they'll be like, oh my God, it feels so heavy in here, or it feels light, or I want to cry. And so that kind of gives me an indicator too, that, okay, something might be going on. And then I ask for, witnesses that I can talk to. If a paranormal team's been out there, what's their contact number? Who do I talk to? Just to try and vet out as much as I can before we set up any kind of investigation. And also, it's so important that they have medical evals ready for us to review.
Nice. I remembered what I wanted to ask before when you were getting into the church, how they're stepping back more these days because of the way things are these days in today's society. I remember there being a priest back in the 70s that actually was put in jail. There was a real case, if you remember this case from Germany, where there was a young lady that died during an exorcism or under the care of a priest, and it was based. There was a movie based on true events. I don't know.
Was it Annalise?
Annalise.
It was the Exorcism of Emily Rose, I think is the movie.
But her real name, I think it was Annalise something.
Annalise is the real person,
I recommend that movie because even though it may not all be factual, because it is Hollywood, but it will guide you to research that particular case.
A lot of things were done wrong in that case.
Yeah.
I mean, you never really know because the church, typically the church holds this work very close to its chest. So a lot of the details and, as far as their methodology, we'll never really know unless we were there. There's just no way to know really what happened. Right. But there were some irregularities that seemed to be present in that case. And, that's some of the, there was another one, I want to say it was actually in the Orthodox Church, if I'm not mistaken. I want to say it happened in Hungary. I could be wrong on that, so don't quote me. But I think
I do remember something being over that way, yes.
There was a monastery, and a nun became possessed, and 2 priests and like 3 nuns tried an exorcism in the monastery, and they ended up crucifying her to a cross. And I'm thinking, well, there's nothing in the rubric of exorcism that says to do that. Yeah. I mean, it's not really funny, but it's so ludicrous you can't help but laugh.
We can laugh, but
yeah. But they did, and she died from the injuries, and I think they were prosecuted, rightfully so. But that's just how crazy some people can get from both sides of it. It's not just always the victim. Sometimes, what's that?
That's why it's so important to keep a level head during this whole thing, because things can get out of control very, very quickly.
Yes.
And you have to be realistic in this work. There's way too much drama. The paranormal community is very... it's divisive, it's disruptive, it's very toxic. I was talking with my wife this afternoon. I was outside smoking a really good cigar, drinking a really nice whiskey, and just enjoying the afternoon. And we're getting excited because of my son's really excited about the new Sonic the Hedgehog movie coming out next week. And so there was she was looking online at one of the voice actors that does Sonic for the video games, which is Roger Craig Smith, and we're big fans of his. We love his work. But there's another game that's really big, Red Dead Redemption. And the actor for the main character in that, Arthur, is Roger Clark, I believe. And so somebody, a fan of Roger Clark's, came on Twitter and said, it's my birthday. Can I have a birthday shout out, please? But tagged Roger Craig Smith and said, is there any, I want to have my birthday shout out by the best voice actor of all time, but was tagging the wrong voice actor in it. So Roger really funnily, in a real funny way, responded to this guy in the voice of the Arthur character, even though he's not the correct voice actor. But he's friends with Roger Clark. They're friends because they're in the same industry. They work in the same basic circles, and they are conducting the same craft as voice actors for video games. So they're all one big family, kind of like Hollywood too. A lot, if you're in movies produced, it's like a close knit family. I mean, they don't all get along clearly, but sometimes, there's a lot of camaraderie within the industry. Not so in the paranormal community. It's completely the opposite. Everybody hates each other. Everyone wants to one up the other. You will never see 2 television exorcists getting along. It just doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Because they're just, I can tell you, all of the other television exorcists that preceded me hate me. And they've made it very clear that they hate me. And there's,
how can they hate Bryan Ouellette? Come on.
I think what it has to do is just simply the fact that I am a very honest and straightforward person. I'm not pretentious.
You don't sugarcoat things.
I don't. I don't. I tell it like it is, and that's why I'm successful at what I do. Because I don't play the games.
I truly respect you for that, because like without that honesty, like how can you respect somebody if they're not honest about their work?
I mean, I don't think there's a way that you really can. And that's the problem, is that there's a lot of deviousness in the paranormal. And I think that has a lot to do with the fact that the paranormal is not a safe thing to play around with. Yeah. And even if you get television shows making millions of dollars, like some of them do, that doesn't mean that it will not have a negative impact on you over time, that everyone's involved in that will eventually feel on some level or another. Right. And I think that sometimes gets into these people's heads, and they don't know how to deal with it. As an exorcist, I am trained in being prepared for those kinds of things.
You've got to know how to protect yourself.
You do. And the best way to do it is not talismans and crucifixes and holy water. The best way to do it is just being down to earth and honest.
Right.
That's the most powerful resistance to the devil, because the devil's the complete antithesis of that. The devil is all about trickery, lies, deception. Yep. Yes. And being honest is just completely violates every aspect of his nature, which makes it very difficult for him to stick around you. So be authentic, be real, even if it's not the best thing, even if you're not the best person in the world, but if that's who you are authentically, then be it. Yeah. Because that's better than being something that you think the church wants you to be, or that you think the Bible tells you to be. If it's not authentic, if it's not part of your nature, it's going to cause you problems down the road.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to actually bring up a little something. Years ago, I wanted to possibly become a demonologist, or I was looking into studying exorcisms and stuff, because as an investigator I always wanted to be prepared for myself and for others that were working with me. God forbid we ran into a serious situation, we would know and have an understanding of what we were getting into or not getting into, and passing that work along to somebody who could better help those people.
And see, that's called responsibility. You got a lot of folks out here that just stir crap up and run the hills.
What I'm getting at is my wife, she didn't want me getting further involved. I just studied demonology. I went as far as that, which is fine. Mm-hmm. I studied demonology for myself because I really wanted to better knowledge of that area, God forbid. But anyway, long story short, my wife was like, you really need strong faith. And she's like, if you want to do this line of work, you really need like serious training. You need to prepare yourself. And not only that, it can affect your family and your friends and your personal life. And that's like something I want to ask you guys, is like what advice you would give others who maybe that want to learn more about what you guys do, or those who even thought remotely or a little ounce of, oh, I want to do that how serious that this position is.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very challenging question, because there's a lot of components to it in order to truly understand how best to proceed if one feels that they are called to this. And that's the most important part to start with. It's a calling, it's a vocation, it's not a choice. One doesn't say, I want to be an exorcist when I grow up. Yeah. What one should say is, I might feel called to priesthood, and I will then see where that leads me. And sometimes by virtue of that calling, they are then placed into a position to be an exorcist. That's the normal way that it happens. Now, that's in the Catholic Church, of course. The other choice is to go to one of the more less sophisticated methods, which would be everything that's not Catholic. Right. And there's a lot of that, and there's a lot of non-Catholic ministries that have varying levels of entrance or initiation, that can be very simple to very complex. Some still require a 6 or 7 year education in a seminary. Some don't even require seminary. So there's a lot of things that people can do to kind of navigate this. The danger, though, is if you go through one of those less sophisticated routes, you're not going to get the training that you need to deal with this. And there's not going to be anybody who can mentor you through it. So unless you know someone who can actually mentor you, I would advise against going into things like demonology or exorcism, only because the mentorship is really the only way to know know how to deal with this. There's no classroom that can teach you this. There's no Vatican program you can go to that will resolve this. It is always going to be ultimately mentorship, field training with someone who knows what the hell they're doing. And if you don't know someone who can do that with you, it's best to just not get involved in it and leave it to those that have pursued that in their lives.
Right.
And if you're looking for a thrill, just don't. Don't.
That's true.
Be strong in whatever faith you have, whatever your spirituality is. Be confident in your faith. Show no fear, but be humble. Humble and confident is the way to do it, and you'll find yourself doing rather well.
And the best thing to answer Matthew, your question about what could you do if you're going out there and doing investigations, and then you come across something like this, you want to have that training to be able to deal with it. Right. Until you're in a position where you can get the proper training, assuming you can find someone that can actually be that for you, a mentor that can mentor you into this work. The best thing to do is to try to make connections with organizations that are doing this work so that you can refer your extreme cases out to them and they can kind of come in. The problem, though, with that is that there's not a lot of us doing this, and those of us who are doing this are very small and grossly underfunded. So there's always going to be more cases and more requests coming in than anybody can. Even if we had a complete, unlimited travel budget for just me and my small little team, which is basically now just Jamie and Tracy, even if we had an unlimited travel budget, there's only so many. We could probably still only take about maybe one case every 2 months. And that's if we did this full time, no other jobs, nothing else going on in our lives, just doing this and nothing else. We'd still only be able to probably take about one case every 2 months at best.
Right. Because you got to properly investigate it, vet it, and then plan it, get it together, do the investigation. And then depending on what you have to do, you've got to recover before you go to the next one properly, because you don't want to be exhausted from one case and then hop into another because you open yourself up for attachment and all kinds of issues.
Correct. Yeah.
So it's so important to recover and spend as much time as you need to recover in between cases, because it'll drain you.
Oh, absolutely. I believe Tracy that you speak of, she's actually in the chat. I believe if that's her.
That's her. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's my wife.
I want to say hello. But I want to thank everybody in the chat. There's a lot of stuff going on in there, and they're interacting with each other, and I think it's great. All these people came tonight to listen to you guys, and obviously a lot of fans. And I'm a fan just because of how you guys approach your work, and like I said, I really respect how you handle your work and how you do it, and I mean that wholeheartedly. Like I respect you guys a great deal, and if there's anything that we can do on our end, like you guys ever need help in our area, let me know. I'm always there for you.
Don't think I won't. Don't think
Absolutely.
I won't.
Yeah. It's always nice to have a network of people that you can connect with if you need some extra support, particularly when it is a genuine possession, because I can tell you, I need more than just me and Tracy and Jamie to go into a true possession. We need people that can hold them down. Usually you need a medical person. Ideally, you need a person holding down each arm, each leg, and a medical person monitoring their vitals the entire time, so that if there's anything going askew, you can cease what you're doing, let them stabilize, and then assess whether or not to go forward or call it a day. Those are the things that you deal with. So, it's always nice to have contacts out there in the world, because it's, like I said, finding networking and camaraderie in this field is very difficult, because there's a lot of, I think it was a Huntress said, there's a lot of ego involved, and that's one of the biggest problems.
That's the first thing you need to put up if you're going to do this job legitimately, because we're here for the dead, and we're here to kind of save people from themselves sometimes. But don't forget the dead. That's what most of these cases are when you're dealing with hauntings and stuff.
When it's authentic, when it's not a trauma that you're projecting out. Yes, when it's not a trauma that you're projecting out, that's a thought form or something. Then it's actually a genuine, legitimate haunting. And that's another problem that we should probably address, is that most Christian churches refuse to accept the existence of ghosts. Most teach that it's a demon pretending to be a dead relative or something, which is not accurate. It is not true. Now, I'm not going to say that demons can't do that. It's just I have never worked a case where I have ever seen that happen. Most of the time when there are ghosts involved, it is genuinely ghosts. And when you make the connection and you offer them an opportunity to come home with you and then go to mass and then you pray for them to be received into the kingdom, which is a part of every mass in the world, whether it be Roman Catholic or Nicolaitan Catholic, we always pray for the dead that they are received into the light of God. And every time we take a case like that, and that's how I end them, I always invite the spirit to come home with me to my private chapel. We have mass, and then typically speaking, almost always, the client reports that all activity has ceased. Yeah.
Wow. That's crazy. I'm glad you brought up the D word, because that's going to be one of my serious questions. So, because these days everybody throws the D word around like more than I wear my pair of underwear throughout the whole week. I don't want to get that dirty, but just wanted to lighten that word up a little bit, break the ice into the D word, because whether you believe or not, I think there's a lot of misguided information about what a demon is and what a demonic haunting is. In your definition, what in your experience and your research and what you've learned, what is the definition of a demon or a demonic haunting?
I would say a demon is most accurately a malevolent, spiritual, or non-corporeal or incorporeal intelligence that is having a negative effect on an individual or group of individuals in a particular location. That is, in its most general sense, that's what a demon is. Now, that does not mean satanic. That does not mean of the devil. That does not mean fallen angel. It can mean any malevolent force, and that includes, and this is going to get a lot of people riled up. That includes dead relatives who are hanging around when they should be crossing over, because they will degrade.
Yep.
We call it spiritual degradation. But the longer a spirit continues to exist or resists moving on here, or what I guess we kind of colloquially call crossing over,
right.
there is degradation there. They slowly break down, and the person that they were slowly degrades into nothing but a source of negativity. So usually people are holding on because they are experiencing a negative emotion at that point of death. The most prominent one is going to be fear. Most people have a natural fear of death, and if they can't resolve that and be prepared to die well, then they take that fear with them into death. And when that happens and they don't have all of the spiritual guidance and graces that the church can provide, and they haven't been working very hard on cultivating that within themselves throughout their lifetime, if they die in a state of fear, then fear is what they slowly degrade and become. And that can be an absolutely treacherous intelligence to deal with, that will behave in every way like a fallen angel or some kind of satanic creature, when in fact it's not. It's basically just a broken spirit that has to be properly put to rest.
And the worst thing you can do is keep Papa and Mima around for your own selfish reasons. They need to move on, because you're doing nothing but hurting yourselves, and especially them.
Correct.
Because they'll be trapped.
Unless God allows the dead to communicate with us, we really should not be trying to grasp onto them. There are occasions where God does let that happen, but most of the time when you do the research on this, you find that it's usually only within the first few days of a person passing that relatives will experience that dead relative around them. But then it goes away. It dissipates. But if it continues on months or years later, that's a problem.
Yeah.
And you need someone like us to kind of help you get it, to move on.
Yeah. because that residual energy, that demonic energy will latch onto that.
Yeah.
Use it.
That's right.
Feed off of it. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, wow. That was great explanation of all my questions. I think we did a well job here on the Strange Oddities podcast. I can't believe we're down at the bottom of the show. I wish we could do like 2, 3, 4 hours of this, because believe me, I could go on all night. There's so much to learn about this. There is. And
we're all learning all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to guide everybody to your website, to where they can watch your live feeds, because I know you guys do your own live feeds during the week. Where can they access your information of getting you on Facebook or any social media, stuff like that?
Well, we're in a lot of different places. They can find me at Exorcist Bishop on Instagram. I'm no longer on Twitter. Jamie Wolfe is on Twitter. So you can still find her there. And our podcast still airs on her account. So you can still watch Vestiges After Dark, which is our podcast. When in season, it airs Tuesdays at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. And that you can find, the best place to go is Nicolean TV on YouTube. That's Nicholean TV on YouTube. So just basically type in a Google search, put Nicolean TV in there, and you'll find the link to it, and subscribe. It helps us, and it allows you to be able to connect with everything that we do there. If you want a more developed understanding of what we do and all of the things that we've got going on, then just go to our website, which is esotericcatholic.org. You can also go to nicolean.org. Either one will get you to the same place. But yes, Jamie is on Twitter. I'm on Instagram. You can also find my public account on Facebook. Just look up Exorcist Bishop, and I am there. And that's the best places to reach us and find the things that we do. Right now, like I said, we've suspended the intakes because we've got too many cases that we're trying to sort through right now. But we do hope that in the near future, we're going to be working on making some administrative changes to how we operate, and we hope to be able to open up the outreach and make it a little bit more accessible again. So those are things we're working on.
Yeah. And if there's anything that I can do on my end to help push your info out there so that people can get the proper help, so that, those who are in need that are reaching out to you guys, if there's anything I could do network-wise, I'm here to help. I'll put all your info on Strange Oddities Podcast Facebook page. I'll throw any links up there, anything you guys want. I'll throw
Thank you.
Up. Yeah.
Appreciate it, Matt.
Yeah, we appreciate it.
My Twitter handle is Fight the Dark at Jamie_C_Wolfe with an E on the end of Wolf. Nice. You can find me there.
Yeah. Tracy actually just put your tag.
Thanks, Trace.
Yeah,
there you go.
But any events you want to share coming up that you're attending or anything, or?
Right now, we've got our last episode of the season of Vestiges on Tuesday at 8 p.m. We're working on finishing up a documentary that we should be shooting the last parts of it, hopefully in May. We don't know when that will come out or how that will be distributed, but that's something that we've been working on. Got another, few other things that I can't talk about yet. I don't know how those will develop. That might turn into something interesting down the road. But right now, we just can kind of waiting for all of the remaining COVID restrictions to end on public transportation so that we can go back to traveling around the country like normal people again. Yeah. So hopefully that's coming up soon. And yeah, and then when that happens, we'll start taking national cases again, I think.
Yeah, nice. So that's awesome. And for those who are like into the religious stuff, they also do, the live masses on their feed, and I think it's amazing. I love watching their whole thing, and I think it's great what you guys do on there.
Thanks, I appreciate it. I'm glad that you watch it. I'm glad that a lot of people seem to be getting a lot of it out of it. It's going to be. We're going through into Holy Week here soon. Not this week, but next week, and then that's going to be a long run because that's a liturgy every single day. And we'll stream it all. On Thursday, there's 2 that we'll stream. And then after Easter, we're going to take a little break, and I'm looking at putting my home up on the market, which the chapel that we're streaming out of is in my home.
Oh.
And there might be some disruptions to the live mass during that time, most likely, but hopefully we'll be able to get it up and running again. Ideally, we're working on maybe getting a public location, even if it's a small location, away from the house, where we can just have all this equipment set up all the time. And, it'll always be available. And no matter what's going on in my personal life or Jamie's personal life, it won't disrupt the streaming schedule. That's what we'd like to get to. We're working on it. But it's a work in progress. A small church like this doesn't get the exposure or the funding it needs. So we have to work slowly.
Yeah. No, understandable. So, the pandemic hasn't helped.
No, it hasn't. It slowed us up a bit. I feel like I'm 2 years behind where I used to be.
Yeah, we're actually steamrolling pretty good. And then it was just like, not only did we pump the brakes, we flipped the car.
Yeah.
That's true. Yeah, that's true.
I love your analogies. I love it. That's great. I hope I was a gracious host for you guys.
You were, yeah, absolutely, Matthew. Thank you.
One of the good ones, Matt. Thank you.
Yeah. Always a pleasure having you guys. Love to have you again down the road. Keep in touch, and best of luck to all your events and things that you guys do. Any last words or anything you guys like to say before we say our goodbyes to our audience?
Jamie, why don't you take it, and then I'll follow up.
I would just say, everybody stay safe no matter what you're doing. Love each other as hard as you can, because you never know when it's going to be the last day for any of us. And be kind, because there's too much anger and hatred in the world. And the only thing that's going to bring us out of this is love. So wake up and smell the coffee.
I like that. And in I guess continuation to that, all I would say is don't be seduced by the divisiveness of the world. Don't let politics rule your life. Don't let anything, not even religion, rule your life. These are tools that you should be using for everyone's benefit, not just yours, everyone's. Politics is a tool, but it's not something that's supposed to be lorded over you. Religion's a tool, shouldn't be lorded over you. The church isn't something that should control you. You should be something that's a participant a free participant in the church. And that's for all of these things. So if you're getting involved in religion, or if you're thinking that you want to join a community, the most important thing that you need to look for is make sure that there is a freedom that you feel from within, that it gives you. If it doesn't give you freedom, if it's restrictive, then throw it out of your life. Anything that takes away your freedom, throw out of your life. It is not of God. And that's the most important lesson that you can take into your future that I can give you at any point in any talk I ever give. That's the most important one I can tell you about. As the bishop
says, God unites, the devil divides.
That's right.
So choose wisely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Amen to that. I totally agree, 100%. And my advice, as I always give at the end of my show, is be kind, have compassion. With all the crap going on out there, just show kindness and have a little compassion and a little respect for people can go a long way. And that's why I ask for everybody, and respect the law enforcement. I'm patriotic. Let's respect and be thankful and grateful for the men and women who serve our country, that are at the front lines, during this whole pandemic and disaster that's going on out there, those poor people out in Ukraine. And, just, be good to each other. That's all I ask, be kind. I think those are good words.
Absolutely.
All right. Guys, if you don't mind, stay on with me while I close the show out a little bit. We'll say our goodbyes privately, if you don't mind.
Okay, cool.
All right.
Sure thing.
All right, guys.
All right, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. God bless.
Thanks. Yeah. Thanks for being a guest on Strange Oddities podcast. Hope everybody enjoyed Bishop Bryan Ouellette and Jamie Wolfe. And, it's been educational, to say the least. So I'm going to minimize you guys right now so I can give the last words out here to our show. Guys, those that were in the chat, thank you so much for all your comments and input. I read them all. I couldn't get to everybody, but there weren't many questions in there, but just a lot of comments and stuff and statements. But I do appreciate, the participation in the chat. Want to thank all of our viewers and listeners. Again, please go to our Facebook page for our upcoming guest announcements. Next week, I have Simone Santos a woman from Brazil who's really heavy into video ITC research, and her stuff, her work and research is amazing. Wait until you see her captures and her evidence of video ITC. She follows Claude Schreiber from the early 80s, and she follows his method to a T, and the work she does is just, it's phenomenal. It really is. It'll blow your mind. So that's going to be next Thursday, guys. So I hope you guys can tune in for that show that night. Going to play our video, say our goodbyes. Guys, have a great night. Hope you enjoyed tonight's show.